9 days. That is the number sitting at the center of the most significant British weather forecast of 2026, and it changes everything about how this warm spell needs to be understood. Not a warm weekend. Not a couple of pleasant afternoons followed by the grey Atlantic resuming its usual authority over the British Isles. 9 consecutive days of above-average temperatures, building from the low to mid-20s at the start of the sequence, and climbing toward 28 degrees Celsius by midweek, with the warmth remaining anchored across the country by a high-pressure system that the Met Office has described as expected to be the dominant influence across much of the UK for the full duration. The weather maps generated by WXCharts and the ECMWF modeling system have turned dark red across England and parts of Wales, and that color is not telling you it is going to be warm for a day or two. It is telling you that a substantial mass of warm continental air has arrived and intends to stay. Understanding what 9 days of this means, not just for your weekend plans, but for the health of the most vulnerable people in those red-covered counties, for the infrastructure that will be operating under sustained thermal stress, and for the trajectory of a year that is already running hotter than any previous year in British recorded history, is what this story is actually about. The forecast architecture of the 9-day sequence is the first thing worth understanding in precise terms. The ECMWF projections, which form the basis for the widespread coverage this forecast has received from Yorkshire Live to Coventry Live to LBC, reveal a substantial warm air mass moving northward from continental Europe and settling over Britain in a pattern the Met Office confirmed in its May 20th to 29 forecast range. The high pressure from the south, in the Met Office's own language, could quickly start to build as the bank holiday weekend approached, delivering fine and dry conditions. Thereafter, the Met Office added, high pressure is expected to broadly remain the dominant influence across much of the UK, with spells of fine weather. That phrase, broadly remain the dominant influence, is the meteorological description of a blocking pattern, a high-pressure system that is not drifting through on its usual schedule, but has parked itself in a position where it deflects the Atlantic weather systems that would normally arrive every few days to reset the temperature back toward the seasonal baseline. 9 days of that kind of blocking is not a routine warm spell. It is an event with the atmospheric character of a genuine extended warm period. And for the communities sitting deepest inside the dark red zone on those maps, it will feel increasingly significant with each passing day of the sequence. The WXCharts temperature progression across the 9 days tells the story of how the warmth builds and where it concentrates. From Friday, temperatures broadly hit the low to mid-20s throughout England and Wales, already comfortably above the seasonal average of 15 to 17 degrees Celsius for late May, sitting in the range that feels genuinely warm to a population that has been managing a cold, wet, and gray spring. By Sunday, much of southern Britain is projected to see 23 to 25 degrees Celsius, with the hottest weather focused on London, the southeast, and East Anglia, the trio of regions that consistently sit at the top of any UK temperature ranking during southerly warm events due to the urban heat island effect of Greater London, the flat terrain of East Anglia that allows continental air to maintain its temperature as it moves inland, and the positioning of both areas in the direct path of the southerly airflow. Then the warmth escalates further through the following week. The ECMWF projections. For Wednesday and Thursday of the week following the bank holiday weekend show swathes of England depicted in orange and deep red as temperatures reach their highest point of the sequence at 27 and 28 degrees Celsius. LBC's reporting of the ECMWF data was specific. Highs of 28 degrees Celsius in London on Sunday, with Monday, May 25th expected to be the warmest day of the bank holiday weekend at 29 degrees Celsius in the southeast. 29 degrees. That is 1 degree away from a threshold that has only been breached in May once in the entire recorded history of British meteorology. The Met Office's heatwave definition is the critical framework for interpreting what a 9-day warm spell reaching 28 degrees Celsius actually represents in official terms. The heatwave threshold varies by region, reflecting the fact that populations in different parts of the country have different physiological and infrastructural adaptations to heat. In the southeast of England, Greater London, Kent, Surrey, Sussex, Essex, Berkshire, and the surrounding home counties, the threshold sits at 28 degrees Celsius for 3 consecutive days. In northern England and the East and West Midlands, the threshold drops to 25 degrees Celsius. In Wales, it sits at 25 degrees Celsius. This means that within the 9-day warm sequence currently being forecast, the conditions exist for an official heatwave declaration across multiple regions simultaneously, with the southeast approaching or reaching its 28-degree threshold on the midweek peak days, while the Midlands and northern counties could be sitting at or above their lower 25-degree threshold for multiple consecutive days within the same sequence. The Met Office has been building confidence in this pattern, with increasing model agreement across successive forecast runs, pointing toward Britain's warmest period of the year to date and the potential for its first official heat wave of 2026. The public health dimension of a 9-day warm period is categorically different from a 2 or 3-day warm spell, and that distinction is the most important and least communicated aspect of this forecast event. The UKHSA's Heat Health Alert System, which runs its core alerting season from June 1st to September 30th, would issue an extraordinary alert for a significant heat episode occurring before that date. And the current forecast, running from late May well into the final days of the month, sits in the extraordinary alert zone for its opening days before transitioning into the core season. The extraordinary alert carries the same operational weight as an in-season alert, but arrives when the health and social care sector has not completed its full summer heat readiness activation. The 9-day duration is what elevates the health risk beyond what any individual warm day within the sequence would represent. The body acclimatizes to heat over a period of 7 to 14 days of sustained warm exposure, a process through which the cardiovascular system, sweat gland output, and hormonal fluid balance regulation all recalibrate for the warmer thermal environment. For the first 3 to 4 days of this 9-day sequence, the population is operating without meaningful acclimatization. The heat is real. The physiological preparation for it is not yet in place. And the mortality risk during that unacclimatized opening window is higher per degree of warmth than the risk during the later days of the same sequence when the body has begun to adjust. The specific populations carrying the highest health risk across the 9 days are consistent and predictable. People over the age of 65, particularly those living alone in homes without mechanical cooling, managing multiple chronic conditions and taking medications that interfere with thermoregulation, face the sharpest elevation of danger when temperatures remain above the seasonal average for 9 consecutive days without THE overnight cooling that would normally allow the body to recover from daytime heat stress. The British Heart Foundation has confirmed that heat waves increase the risk of dying from a heart attack by up to 50%. The ONS data from the 2022 summer documented over 4,500 excess deaths in England associated with that year's heat periods. Both of those statistics apply to heat events arriving in July. A 9-day event arriving in late May, before the NHS, care homes, summer heat protocols, before the population has made the behavioral adjustments that gradually warmer spring weather normally triggers, and before the country has shifted from its spring heating retention mindset to a summer heat management one, carries a risk profile that the headline temperature number alone does not communicate. 9 days at 25 to 28 degrees, starting from a cold snap baseline 2 weeks ago, is a physiological shock to the most vulnerable portion of the population that the health system needs to be preparing for with the same urgency it would apply to a winter cold alert. The infrastructure story of a 9-day warm period is also different in character from a short duration event. Network Rail's heat management protocols are calibrated to escalate across multiple days of sustained warmth, with speed restrictions, thermal imaging surveys, and engineering interventions all becoming more intensive as the duration of the warm period extends. Rail surface temperatures in direct sunlight run more than 20 degrees above ambient air temperature, meaning that 28-degree air temperatures on the midweek peak days translate to rail surface readings approaching 48 to 50 degrees Celsius on fully exposed track sections. The compressive forces in continuously welded steel rail build, not just with temperature, but with the cumulative duration of sustained elevated temperatures, and a 9-day sequence at the levels being forecast places older, LES upgraded sections of the network under a thermal stress load that extends significantly further than a 2-day warm spell would produce. The London Underground, whose deep tube lines already regularly exceed 30 degrees Celsius during summer operations, faces 9 days of elevated thermal loading on its signaling, power, and rolling stock systems simultaneously. Transport for London's operational planning for the sequence will be adjusting maintenance schedules, service monitoring, and passenger flow management across the full duration of the warm period rather than for a single high-risk afternoon. The half-term and bank holiday timing of this 9-day sequence is the dimension that creates the most significant interaction between the warm weather and the population's behavior patterns. The bank holiday weekend, Saturday and Sunday of the sequence's opening days, followed by Monday, May 26th, as the bank holiday itself, coincides with the warmest days of the opening phase of the warm period, with Sunday projected at 28 degrees Celsius in London and Monday at 29 degrees. Millions of families across England and Wales are planning outdoor activities, trips to the coast, days in the park, and sporting events during precisely those peak temperature days. The school May half-term that follows extends the outdoor exposure window from our children, families, and tourism-dependent businesses through the week of maximum warmth forecast to arrive on Wednesday and Thursday. The combination of bank holiday outdoor behavior, school holiday activity patterns, and 27 to 28 degree peak temperatures arriving on consecutive days creates the specific public health risk profile that the UKHSA's extraordinary alert mechanism was designed to address. Sunburn, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke in children are the acute outcomes that concentrate most sharply when warm weather coincides with school holidays and bank holidays. And the prevention of those outcomes requires the practical advice to reach the families planning those outdoor days before they leave the house, rather than after the symptoms begin. Northern regions and coastal areas will experience a somewhat different version of this 9-day warm spell, and that regional variation is worth understanding clearly. The Met Office forecast confirmed that northern regions and coastal areas are expected to remain cooler than the south owing to sea breezes and their greater distance from the warm air mass's continental source. Scotland is likely to sit 5 to 8 degrees cooler than the southeast at any given point in the sequence, with temperatures in Edinburgh and Glasgow tracking in the upper teens to low 20s rather than the mid to high 20s of the warmest days. Northern Ireland mirrors this pattern. Even coastal areas of southern England benefit from the sea breeze effect during the warmest afternoon hours. As cooler air off the English Channel flows inland and moderates the temperature by 3 to 5 degrees compared to inland areas sitting away from that moderating influence. This means that the 9-day sequence is being experienced very differently by a family in Bournemouth, where the afternoon sea breeze will keep temperatures in the low to mid-20s, and by a family in Cambridge or Reading, which sit in the zone of maximum warmth away from any maritime moderating influence. The dark red on those maps is concentrated in the inland southeast and East Anglia for a reason, and the people living in those specific areas bear the highest cumulative heat burden of the full 9-day sequence. The confidence that has been building in this forecast across a successive model runs through this past week as the final element of the story that matters for understanding how seriously to take the 9-day projection. Precise temperatures may yet change over the next few days. That is the honest caveat that forecasters attach to any medium range. Temperature forecast, and the difference between a 26 degree and a 28 degree peak can depend on exactly where the high pressure center sits relative to the moisture source and the urban amplification zones. But the direction of the forecast is not in doubt, and the confidence building across successive model runs is the signal that matters most. When the ECMWF and WXCharts are both pointing in the same direction across multiple successive model runs, when the Met Office's own forecast language describes high pressure as expected to broadly remain the dominant influence across much of the UK for the full 9-day window, when LBC is reporting ECMWF data showing 29 degrees Celsius for bank holiday Monday in the southeast, and when regional outlets from Yorkshire to Coventry are all drawing on the same modeling output showing the same dark red spread across England, the 9-day warm period is not a speculative possibility being floated by one optimistic model on one run. It is the operational forecast that health planners, infrastructure operators, and water resource managers are now using to make decisions that will shape the next 9 days for millions of people. The dark red maps are already here. The 28-degree Scorcher is arriving today, and the full 9 days of what follows are already written in the atmospheric data, waiting for the country to either prepare for them or be surprised by them. Preparation is still possible. Surprise is a choice,